This is the smart house we were promised. Everything from my phone. The push of a button.
How's that panned out for you, mate, in a general sense?
It's work in progress. Work in progress. Nothing is ever easy.
No, exactly. You know, if you're sitting at home listening to this podcast and you have a functional working smart home setup that, you know, seamlessly adheres to your preferences, and when you press buttons, stuff happens, you know, your blinds open and close, plays music or whatever with no dramas, let us know. Write in about it, because I think Raf could use some pointers.
I don't need friggin' smart home pointers, thanks. That's the last thing I want. Keep it to yourself.
All right, folks. So as we know, we're still in the midst of baby season.
Yep.
That's what I'm calling it. Raf is a third-time father, relatively seamless, but you know there are still things to do, which keep him busy. So as we said last week, it's going to be a slightly disrupted for next couple of weeks, but we're still bringing you content. And we thought that today would actually be a good day, because it has been a bit touch and go over the past few weeks, that we just rattle off and see where everyone's at. We do a temperature check on the tech industry.
Yeah, I also would like to say, though, that with regards to AI, like think of this as like not a primer. I don't want to say it's basic, but like things have kind of shaken out a bit. And it's worth going over all of the big companies and all the big AI companies, where they're actually at with AI, what their strategies are. Because before we go any further, and we'll break them down one by one individually, what I think has become clear now, and we've talked about this a bunch, we've kind of like skimmed over it, but I think the three big AI players, let's say, being OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, it's quite clear that they have lanes that have kind of carved out, that become more apparent. I think this is what we'll go through. But like as a brief overview of what I mean by that is like it's becoming clearer that OpenAI is a more consumer-focused company. We'll maybe go through a bunch of like the different attempts they're having to like in order to really like bury down into that. It's becoming clear that Anthropic is a enterprise play. You know, it's a coding, enterprise, etc.
Yep.
And it's becoming kind of clearer that Google is more this kind of integrated across their suite of apps player. And then we'll also kind of touch on like where Microsoft's at, where Meta's at, I guess where XAI is at, and Apple potentially as well.
Apple. Yeah, I think Apple's kind of the interesting one in that group as well.
We probably won't touch on much of the Chinese models other than to say they're doing great, seemingly.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Although we'll actually point out at the very top, sorry to interrupt, James, but
right.
So interestingly this week, because we're not going to touch on it that much, but like Alibaba lost a bunch of their key talent because apparently they've been asked to like, you know, they've obviously been a big open source player and like really right up there when it comes to open source, but a bunch of people left because they wanted to commercialize, and it sounds like they want to be doing a closed model and really try and make some money off this AI stuff, and a bunch of people, their leading researchers, left potentially due to that. Anyway, just something I heard. Thought I'd pass it on.
And we're also kind of on the edge of our seat for the next big release of DeepSeek. As you may recall, the last time they did a big numbered release, it caused the global economy to briefly collapse. I'm putting my prediction on the line and saying I don't think that will happen a second time, but I could be wrong.
Totally.
I could be wrong. They may shock us. And I think you also just pointed out like an interesting theme that I think will pop up a few times here. Definitely comes up in the meta section, which is that a lot of companies that sold themselves on being open source are now realizing this might be a winner-takes-all market where you need to keep some things close to your chest and we can't be open source anymore.
Yeah.
It seems like that's a live conversation in Meta right now, at least. But yeah, you're right. I think we'll probably touch on what China's up to in a future episode, and we might leave them aside for now. Anyway, so I think we can all agree that as it's shaken out, the top tier of AI companies that are making frontier models and releasing stuff are OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. Those are your three. Probably OpenAI and Anthropic at the very top, with Google maybe slightly behind them. Those are basically the three. And you're right. The divide seems to be, and it's not totally clean, but OpenAI is more consumer focused. They clearly want to be the next Apple. They want to release devices. They want to be in everyone's pocket. They want ChatGPT to be the thing that every single person is using to do work, to live, to shop, to search, to whatever, with like real world connections. Whereas Anthropic says, we want to be the enterprise, not just coding, although coding is a big part of it, but like any kind of business logic stuff, any kind of like reasoning work that gets done in white collar labor, whether it be in law or consulting or, whatever, government. We want to be that.
Yeah.
And then Google is kind of like, I hesitate to make a comparison, but it's like kind of like the Microsoft of the 90s of AI, where it's like we are just going to like own every surface and like push AI through every little connection that we have through enterprise, through cloud, through customer, through whatever.
Yeah, totally. Well, in maps, in docs, in email, in search, wherever it is, it's like this more kind of, in some ways, modular AI. Like, well, of course, they have Gemini as well, which is your chatbot, but this more kind of like AI being everywhere. But okay, let's knuckle down a bit. So OpenAI to start with, I think the things that might make this more obvious. Obviously, they're not getting rid of enterprise. They would love to be in the enterprise as well. Codex is their version of Claude Code. They would love to be there as well.
Totally. Yeah.
However, what I think it makes it pretty clear is things like having Sora as its own kind of social media site.
Yep.
Like this is like a social media feed. That is obviously very much like basically OpenAI need to find a way to kind of 10x their revenue, and seemingly the way that they are attempting to do that is to basically just increase subscriptions, right? Like that is the play. As well as obviously they're looking at things in enterprise. They talk about science. They talk about this other stuff. But right now, all of the energy that they seem to be bringing seems to be around, so Sora as a video app, e-commerce, another big one, like where people do their shopping. Although it's not going great. So like about 9 months ago or something, they announced having this checkout feature within OpenAI. That hasn't worked. They basically rolled that back. So they talked about doing these partnerships where you could transact, like you could buy things off like Grubhub and things like that within the app itself, within ChatGPT. You'd be able to like pay for things. This turned out to basically not work for a number of reasons, mostly because like there are a whole heap of other things you need that a really simple Stripe integration doesn't help with, like, people's locations and like tax and this kind of things that the actual like place you're buying from need all this information. Apparently it wasn't working very well in ChatGPT. So they've rolled it back somewhat so that now it is basically you do your research in ChatGPT and then you link off to Grubhub or whatever it is to complete the purchase.
Sure.
That's a real kind of back down from what they were initially aiming for, primarily because like if you control the purchasing, if you control like that checkout, you can obviously take away a bigger cut, right? If everything is happening completely on your platform, that's very different to people researching things and then linking away and then you getting like a little commission. You know what I mean? You're just getting an affiliate play there as opposed to like owning that entire transaction.
Yep, I agree. Yeah. So they're sort of struggling to figure out what their play is there. Obviously, again, they are the guys more than anyone who think we want to be the interface and touch surface for, the search replacement. This is what we've been talking about for years. It's very clearly still an aspiration of theirs that like we would like to replace Google. We would like to be the place that is the first place you go, you open up ChatGPT, and then you can do everything through our interface. And like the AI surfaces things that you want. You ask natural language questions and say, I need some, a swaggy new trucker hat, first thing that came to mind. And ChatGPT will help you research that and help you make the purchase. They clip the ticket, everything. We organize your life, organize everything. They would like to be that. That runs them up against Google. One thing I will note, and I know you mentioned Sora. This is kind of interesting. The information reported at the tail end of last week. Headline, OpenAI plans to launch Sora Video AI in ChatGPT in a strategy shift. And the reason they're doing that is because the Sora app has essentially flopped. Here's the quote. In the fall, Sam Altman told employees that only a small percentage of Sora users were actually sharing their videos through the app. And it's also plummeted from the top spot of Apple's App Store when it first launched. It's now sitting at about 165.
I mean, who could have seen this coming? Like, what you're saying, people don't want a feed of random people's AI-generated videos?
No. And I think, don't get me wrong, there's tons of Sora content out there. You just see it on TikTok and Instagram Reels. And it's because I think the behavioral sort of thing is that like people will watch AI video and they'll watch like there's tons of slop. There's tons of very creative slop that pops up on my various video feeds where I'm like, good job there. There's this whole genre where it's like, which would you rather? Which toilet would you rather? And it's like different toilets. Like here's a glass toilet. Here's a toilet that's made out of like cactus. Here's like a toilet that's made out of marshmallows. And there's all different genres. Like a bed made out of this. Or would you prefer, what kind of like bathtub would you prefer to sit in? And there's all sorts of disgusting things. And it's all Sora.
That's like there's a kid's book. It's like Shelley Sips Spiders or something like that, where it's basically just like goes through 5 different kids, like different bathtubs and different beds or whatever. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like that except for adults. I generally maybe like Sora or Google VR or whatever. But the point is like I see that come across my feed and I'm like, well, that's, but I'm not downloading an app and opening it so I can see tons of that.
Yeah, but there's that rule. The social media rule is 99.1 or whatever, 1990, which is 1% of people post content, 9% of people kind of comment and engage, and 90% of people just literally lurk. And so, like, you need the 90%. I mean, you mean the 99%. Like, we are the 99%. Like, if you're not going on there to be creating videos, why would you go on there?
Totally.
You're not on there lurking. So like the 90% of people is like there's no driver to go on there and be entertained by AI videos, I would suggest. And I mean, I would even suggest like engaging and commenting, but not creating. That ain't happening.
No. And you're up against the fact of like who that's not like Meta launching another competitor clone, who has launched a social media platform or like a platform that has gotten like mass adoption over the past, since the launch of TikTok, basically.
Yeah.
And TikTok was like still a shock because like they became the biggest app on the planet. I don't know, not in terms of raw numbers, but certainly in terms of hype and usage and all sorts of bits and pieces. And they came out kind of out of nowhere. But apart from them, everything has been Meta launching Reels or Meta launching Threads. And even that is,
It's just going well. Aren't the recent numbers that it's like it has gone past Twitter?
Yeah,
which is a big down around dub to me.
It is.
Big RAF dub.
Yeah, sure. I'll hand that
as we discussed. Let's not derail this with the Threads for chat.
But every time I open it, it's like looking into a parallel universe. It's just like
exactly that is very much a parallel universe.
People's priorities are just completely different.
Yeah.
They're talking about different stuff in a different way than on X, and it's probably good because most of the discussion on X is pretty hostile in various ways.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but back to OpenAI. So back to reinforce the point about this kind of consumer brand. That kind of being the lane and the all in would, other things is like, loosening up companionship, them really leaning into companionship and potentially having erotic conversations with your AI bot. The way it talks, it's very like emoji driven. It's very kind of personable. They lean into like relationship advice, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
This is a consumer app.
Even like the New York Times had a story this week as well that like, I apologize, it was the Wall Street Journal. There's internal chaos about this like fucking erotic chatbot thing. And like a lot of their advisors are like, why the hell are you doing that? OpenAI's bid to allow X-rated talk is freaking out its own advisors. And the quote, the killer quote that they put in the stand first of this story is that one of their advisors said to them, "You are risking creating a sexy suicide coach."
That's the worst kind of suicide coach.
That's red hot. It seems like there are multiple factions within the org, this is what the story alludes to, who are like, some of them are like, we should be doing this. People are doing it anyway. We need to capture it and let them do it safely. And then there are people who are kind of like, what the hell? Why? There's no reason for us to become like a porn company.
Yeah.
I think like the fundamental thing is they want to be everything to everyone. Like they want to be the mass market company that you live your life through. And that pulls you towards doing everything, which is why they always chase every shiny bauble that pops up in front of them.
Yeah.
But also it just like, it leads you into these weird problems that Anthropic just does not have.
No, totally.
Not because people aren't doing this stuff with Claude. It's because they're not like getting up in front of everyone and being like, we want to be the sexy suicide coach, right? Like they just don't get sucked into those disputes.
That would have been a good Twitter handle like 12 years ago. So, but the problem they have is, right, like, so they're sitting at about 5% of subscribers actually pay for a subscription, which is pretty normal. And don't get me wrong, like, that's been very quick to get there.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, most people for most things on the internet are going to sit at the free version. That is just the case with 99% of things on the internet. Most people are going to be fine with the free one. Because, like, the reality is most people don't need to optimize their life or whatever. They want to use it from time to time to do things. They don't hit any limits.
They want to ask, how long is the coastline of Croatia?
Yeah, exactly.
They want to know the answers to simple questions like that.
A simple question like that. The answer is, of course, there is no answer. the coastline paradox? Simple answer. It's a paradox. They want to know the simple answer to the question shoes. And they'll be fine with ads for that matter. But basically, and there was an article shared in the Discord. I think it was on I think it was a Mumbrella article, actually. Mumbrella article, basically looking at like, okay, how does OpenAI go from 20 billion revenue to 120 billion revenue in the next kind of 3 years? And some of those answers are ads, obviously, but that doesn't get you all the way there. You'd be lucky to, especially as like they're starting so late, to get a few bill there. Some of that might have been e-commerce, but that seems to have gone away basically, as we just discussed.
Breaking news alert. I assumed that everything we just said previously was bang on because the Wall Street Journal has just reported that OpenAI's top executives are finalizing plans for a major strategy shift to refocus the company around coding and business users, recognizing, much like the Down Round podcast did, that a do everything all at once strategy has put them on the defensive. Children, I love that you're being creative, but Dad's just recording a little thing for a podcast right now. Give me 10 seconds of silence. Anyway, as mentioned, I assume we basically said the same thing. What they're doing isn't working and they have to do a strategy shift. Okay, my children can't stay quiet for 10 seconds. That's all right. Let kids be kids. On with the show.
I know they're hedging hard on like, we're going to do drug discovery and then patent drugs and make a lot of money that way. That's like although I haven't heard him say that as much recently, Sam Altman, but 2 months ago, that was all he was talking about.
Yeah, I haven't heard that in a while. Well, it's back in the news because of that guy the Australian dude who, I mean, the story, I still haven't quite wrapped my head around.
Cured his dog of cancer? Have we fact checked this?
Yeah, I mean,
you should tell the story. Tell the story first.
The story is that this guy, Australian dude, he did the breakfast TV circuit. His dog is dying of cancer. He loves his dog. So he worked with ChatGPT to make a vaccine, which he has made, which he did over the course of however long, and then has injected his dog with it, and its tumor is shrinking. This is like the top line story that spread like wildfire everywhere. And when you read it a little bit deeper, and I'm not going to speak out of school because I haven't gotten every single beat of this story correct, so please forgive me.
So should mention is ChatGPT and Google DeepMind's AlphaFold.
Yeah, he used that. That's right. He used AlphaFold with DeepMind. But it seems like the general thrust of it is he did research on ChatGPT. AlphaFold was involved at some level. He used ChatGPT to help himself write like this 100-page proposal that he went to some lab that can create like mRNA vaccines. And he ended up, I don't know, using the whole point was that it was more of a research tool, and he ended up spending a lot of money at like some sort of facility or company that would do this. And there's a lot of scientists who are coming out and are like, yeah, if you want to like, you know, the whole point of drugs is that they have to work on a wide population range across and be widely tested to show that they do, and blah, 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 blah. But on the other side, people are like, no, this is just like the first glimmer of something where people are going to have fully personalized vaccine schedules and fully automated production or whatever. But the point is there are tons of different holes in the story. It wasn't the case where he was just like, ChatGPT, make me a vaccine, and then he had a lot of capital, I believe, at hand. Like this guy spent a lot of money on a customized medical solution, which he could have done without ChatGPT, but it was part of the discovery process. This is my understanding.
Yeah. And also, it seems like a lot of what ChatGPT did was like, because you need to get approval for testing new vaccines on things. I mean, we don't want another... Yeah. No one knows what happened in that wet market / research center in Wuhan. But you can't just go out there making your own vaccines. It sounds like a lot of the paperwork and potentially ChatGPT stuff was just like on applications to get like approval to make the vaccine.
Yeah, totally. He made a big point about how he spent all this time writing this 100-page document. And I was like, bro, that's what ChatGPT should be doing.
Yeah, but I assume that's what ChatGPT did. Because AlphaFold is famous for like, this is the protein folding thing, and probably won't go into it, that DeepMind did a few years ago. Very famous. They folded every protein in the world. And the point is he could like put this genetic mutation sequence into AlphaFold to identify the specific proteins that were needed for the vaccine, that he then worked with the University of New South Wales and the Ramos Scotti Center for genomics. So this isn't just like dude typed into ChatGPT how to make vaccine for cancer dog and then mix some baking soda with
kill my dog,
some food dye.
And also, I don't think the dog is cured.
No, also it's the tumor shrunk, right?
That's what he says. Yeah.
The tumor shrunk maybe by about half, and his coat looked a bit better.
Which, you take your wins where you can get them. I'm not ready to fully celebrate.
But you know what? You can see, to give it some, assuming that it actually worked.
I suspect you're going to see more of this stuff.
Like personalized drugs.
Yeah. And we were talking about all the fucking, the guys who are injecting peptides into their dicks or whatever.
Yeah.
Because they love to optimize. You're going to see more of this shit out of them, right? Yeah. Like these kind of using these tools, their stack of AI tools to help them build these fucking custom DNA vaccines and peptides and shit like that. I imagine you're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. This sort of rock and roll cowboy stuff at the frontier.
Yeah. Anyway, I still think ChatGPT probably has the best app, and I really like the chat, the audio chat interface. I think is still the best, and they're obviously doing. And as I said, Codex does seem to be very good. People seem to really like Codex. I haven't used it myself.
The latest update, the vibe on the street is that because for some reason they've split their models into two. There's the instant model, which is the default one when you're using it you're just using it in ChatGPT and you're a free user or making simple inquiries, is up to GPT 5.2, and their thinking model is 5.4. But the word on the street is that 5.4, the thinking model, is really good. Probably the cutting edge and best model on the market. Probably better than Opus 4.6. And also, you also hear, again, when I'm doing dicking around stuff, I'm generally using Claude Opus. I use Claude Code. But the general vibe that you get from people is that Codex, with their latest models, tends to be more precise and better at dealing with big, messy code bases. It's a more precise tool.
That's what I'm kind of hearing.
Whereas Claude remains much more fun to talk to and iterate and do stuff. Doing those sort of dicking around projects where you're starting from scratch and working on things, it's a more enjoyable and pleasant experience.
Well, more of a one-shot tool as well, right?
But the vibe is that OpenAI are back on the cutting edge for now. So I would imagine we're going to get some Anthropic announcement relatively soon on whatever their next model is.
Yeah, as well as, in the Super Bowl, OpenAI. See, ironically, we're about to talk about how OpenAI is a consumer lane and Anthropic is the coding lane. But during the Super Bowl, Anthropic went full consumer with their ad saying use a chatbot that doesn't have ads. And OpenAI was advertising Codex, but I guess that's also their advertising to their weaknesses to a certain extent there. Because OpenAI's ad was all about Codex and build anything you want, blah, blah, blah.
Totally. And I think we can all agree that regardless of what their focus is, everyone seems to have noticed and agree that the pathway to improvement and cutting edge and winning is through coding. If you get good at coding, a lot of things follow from that. That helps you with recursive self-improvement. That helps you with the reinforcement learning from all the data you're getting through. If you win at coding, you win generally. And I think we'll get to XAI and Grok and shit, but that seems to be their problem right now, that Elon Musk is ripping all the guts out of the company over. But anyway,
the metrics that it's kind of hard to get metrics on these, but it seems OpenAI are around 25 billion. This is US in annual revenue, primarily driven by 20 million paid users. I.e., most of their revenue is coming from paid users, but again, around 25 billion. And that compares with Anthropic, who are at around 20 billion annualized, is what's reported, which is 80% from enterprise customers. So they've really caught up for one. Yeah. They were seen as behind. But 80% of their revenue comes from enterprise customers of that 20 billion. Interesting. Annualized revenue.
Totally. I know that there's a thing that often gets pulled out, but Ramp, which is a corporate spend platform, posted a chart about what AI platforms their commercial customers are spending on. And it was something crazy. It was something more than 80% or 85% of total spend across their customers was on Claude or Anthropic products versus everyone else. But it is obviously worth noticing that Ramp is kind of a hip, trendy company. So they're going to be really over-indexed on startups, and Anthropic's products are a bit memey among startup people. So that's going to influence it. But the point is they're romping at home there. The open question, which is what we talked about a few weeks ago, is they did get designated as a supply chain risk. They're getting ripped out of the US government, where it was deeply integrated. It seemed like every US government department was Claude pilled, and now it's all getting pulled out. it's still an open question about how that's going to affect their commercial work generally. A lot of open questions about companies that are suppliers. For example, Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, Apple reporter, he says that Apple is like a Claude shop. They're partnered with Gemini on Siri, but like in terms of their internal coding work, it's all Claude. But Apple is a US government supplier. It's a military supplier. They sold their Macs and iPhones and other services to the US military. Does that affect whether they can use Claude? I think that's still kind of like a really open question. So
yeah, Amazon, same deal, right?
They've got that dark cloud hanging over their head because of all that. But if you didn't listen to our episode, Anthropic Goes to War, you should check that out because we go into it in some detail. Anyway, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Amazon, same deal. It's like and again, to clarify, it's like companies can't use Claude to work on government contracts. They can't use Anthropic's things to work on government contracts, which, like, if you're doing any kind of dev work and you have Claude as your go-to AI tool, that's going to make it quite hard to fulfill government contracts. Yeah, as you say, we kind of have gone across it, but yeah, it is interesting that Anthropic they have just solidified that enterprise space, which makes sense, I guess, given that they were, well, I guess devs, like, they're a company for devs. I feel like devs love them, so that gets driven from internally. And if they are the best, if there is, like, if you can actually see, calculable, meaningful results, saying like this, it will save X amount of time, therefore it will save X amount of dollars, then organizations are going to use the one that saves the most money, presumably, especially if it's, driven by, devs are just like, we're using it anyway, then it makes sense that they kind of dominate the space.
Totally. They're definitely kicking along. So good work, Anthropic. Good work, Dario Amodei.
Yeah.
And team.
I mean, did we mention it went to number 1 in the App Store though, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. Yeah, we did. It's which is kind of thrown a little bit of a spanner in that, like, okay, there are, as we said, 80% of their revenue comes from enterprise customers, and now all of a sudden they've kind of thrown themselves back into that consumer space, which comes with a bunch of those issues that you mentioned. But like, I think at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty wise move to not do image generation, video generation, in the sense that, like, that does feel like, unless you can monetize that really well for them, like, it does feel like a little bit of a distraction, somewhat.
It's a money pit. Yeah.
Well, not just that, like, you then have to deal with all of the moderation, right? The moderation side of that can get really friggin' hairy, as basically everyone who does image generation has found out one way or another. Google for making the Queen black, XAI for posting child pornography and various other kind of forms of, like, harassing content.
You don't want to get involved. And it just seems like
copyright, like, there's just
copyright. You get, like, again, on the copyright thing, you see that ByteDance is basically, for the foreseeable future, like, cancelled its release of C-Dance in Western markets because of the Hollywood studios. Again, getting pulled into that, and, like, the amount of money you got to spend to be on the cutting edge when they're already spending so much money to be on the cutting edge of their core interest. Contrast this with OpenAI goes after everything. And I think, there is probably a bit of a lack of discipline in that, but there's also, like, if you want to be the everything app, which is what they want to be the Dyson of AI. When you think about vacuum cleaners, you think about Dyson. When you think about AI, you think about OpenAI and ChatGPT. That involves being everywhere and doing everything. Whereas Anthropic is like, no, we're about code, we're about business. So yeah, I agree that it puts them in, like, a better position. That seems to be playing out in the balance sheet as well. With the caveat that for everything we're talking about here, does it look good on the balance sheet? No, not yet. Not remotely. Not for any of these companies. They're all deep in the hole. And now they got a bloody Iranian war to deal with.
Yeah,
and all
true. We all do.
Interruptions there. We all do. We all have to deal with that as men of peace. And we might put the rest of this chat after the paywall. So if you're not a subscriber to Downround Premium, head to downround.net. You get ad-free experience and you get an extra podcast every week. And apologies again to the people who suffered through a week and a bit of feed disruption. I believe this is all resolved now. So
yeah, totally. And if you don't know what we're talking about, would have missed a week's worth of podcasts. If you go back, there might be 2 brand new, fresh podcasts from, like, a fortnight ago that you haven't listened to.
Yeah, which should have popped up. Yep, absolutely. So if you missed the whole thing and the emails we sent and all the rest of it, go back, dig through your feed, because there'll be some Fs for you. Anyway, we'll see you on the other side of the paywall.